Welcome to a very special presentation of the novel A Really Good Day by James Hosek. On its surface, it's a story about a remarkable round of golf. But if you're not a golfer, if you quickly change the channel, if you accidentally come upon a tournament on TV, I encourage you to listen anyway. It's a story about family and friendship. It's a story about redemption and second chances. It's a story about promises made and promises kept. It's a story about once-in-a-lifetime experiences. But most of all, it is one man's love letter to his family. That man was my brother, the author, James Hosek. Aside from being an amazing veterinarian, woodworker, gardener, husband, father, brother, son, and friend, he was a writer. Writers are often told to write what they know. And in this, his first book, he did that in more ways than I can count. It will make you laugh, it will make you cry, and it will make you stand up and cheer. So sit back and enjoy as Jim takes you on a fun, entertaining journey through 18 holes of golf and one man's really good day. Chapter 14. Ninth hole. Again. Andrew Patterson waited patiently as Eric Peters pulled his driver from the bag and slipped off the club cover. Eric placed the grip in Andrew's palm like he was a surgeon awaiting the next instrument for a complicated procedure. He dropped the ball into his other hand. Andrew wouldn't tolerate the ball being placed in his hand. Then he handed Andrew a tee. Andrew placed his ball on the tee and eyed the spot he wanted the drive to go. He needed to stay on the left side of the fairway to minimize the risk of the sand traps guarding the green. Other than that, he was free to give it a good hit. A long drive wasn't necessary to par this hole, and he wasn't about to risk the short pine trees separating the driving range from the hole by being too aggressive. Andrew's style of play was referred to as course management. It required discipline, and many players didn't have the patience to put it to use. It meant playing safe shots rather than going for the killer drive, and trying to make the green in regulation rather than going for every birdie and every eagle possibility. Most of the time, Andrew could count on par. There were the rare bogeys, usually due to factors beyond his control, such as hitting a sprinkler head or a twig, or being forced to putt through someone's ball mark. On the other side, and more frequently, were the birdies that came his way. Usually, he could count on 3 to 6 per 18 holes with his style of play, more than enough to win every tournament. The fact that Hanover had 5 birdies and 1 eagle on the front 9 indicated his style was very aggressive and would catch up with him eventually. It always did. Andrew enjoyed watching other amateur golfers self-destruct, pulling out too much club when the shot called for a 4 or 5 iron. It gave him an advantage and confidence. This hole was 450 yards. Andrew could safely hit his drive and leave the ball about 180 yards from the pin, a perfect distance for his 6 iron. He could pretty much 2-putt from anywhere on the green, and 1-putt if he was near enough for a short chip. The 1-putts were occasionally there, but on this hole he wouldn't count on it unless his second shot was perfect. He placed his tee in the ground and then set his ball on it gently. The letters Callaway lined up straight where he wanted to hit the ball. He lined up his club and set his stance. The setup was key. He strove to be consistent. There was no need to be the longest driver on the course to win, but if he could hit the fairway 95% of the time, he was way ahead of the rest of the pack. He drew back the club, and his perfectly trained muscles coiled and unwound, bringing the head of the driver to meet the ball with a satisfying plink. The ball sailed straight out, bounced behind the 200-yard marker, and rolled another 25 yards. It was just where he wanted the ball to land. He allowed a slight smile to cross his lips as the applause from the crowd acknowledged the shot. Frederick Martin, the player who had hit into the sand next to the green on the previous hole, was next on the tee. Andrew noticed he had one of the severely oversized drivers that were a favorite of amateur golfers. They hit the ball a long way if you hit it right, but most players didn't have the skill to control it. Martin slipped his tee with the ball atop it into the soft ground. He stepped back and leaned toward the tee a little. Slice, thought Andrew, as he watched Martin line up. Fred took a practice swing, the club whipping through the air with an audible whoosh, and his body almost contorting into a pretzel with the follow-through. He left his feet where they were and slid the club head forward to just behind the ball. The elongated stance forced him into an almost baseball swing, and he swung at the ball like it was a grenade about to go off. The ball made a great sound off the club and sailed out far, but the spin carried it to the right, first a little, then more, then almost at a 60-degree angle to his intended line. It rolled into some pine trees that also bordered the first fairway. His reaction was not polite. But what would one expect from a player like that? Kerry Newman set up next. He also seemed determined to kill the ball. His drive, however, went straight and rolled nearly 50 yards past Andrew's shot. A 310-yard drive. The crowd erupted with applause at the monster effort. Even though Andrew was beating Newman by 3 strokes at this time, everyone seemed to appreciate the show-offs more than those with a consistent game. The 3 started moving down the fairway. The golf cart and trailer that had been parked by the water hazard at the 8th hole took the opportunity to speed along the right side of the fairway and beeped through the crowd before the players had to take their second shots. Martin was up first. The crowd along the fairway had spread where he had entered the woods, and his bright red shirt could barely be seen between the boughs of thin white pines. It seemed he was going to hit out. Andrew remained well behind the wayward golfer. He couldn't remember the last time he had ended up in the trees. There was a crack from the woods, and a white ball sailed out and rolled very well along the fairway, taking several good hops, and fatefully ending up in a sand trap at the right front corner of the green. "Am I on?" asked a hopeful voice from the trees. Andrew chuckled to himself. This guy knew nothing about course management. He was a moron for trying for the green from such a lie, even for getting into a lie like that in the first place. A few onlookers kindly shouted, "On the beach, Fred!" and the sand-prone golfer emerged from the woods, shaking his head, looking very much like he wanted to pound his club on the ground. Andrew was next. He was aiming for the green as well, but had a much better chance. The pin placement was excellent for a birdie attempt. It was near the middle of the green. As long as Andrew stayed below the pin, which was a little downhill, he'd have a good shot. Eric handed him the 7-iron. Andrew placed the club behind the ball, letting it guide him where to stand and how to grip it. He made minor adjustments until it felt like the club was an extension of his arms, a part of his body. Even the ball felt like a part of him. His clubs were custom made by an old pro in Tinley Park. Not too far from here, recalled Andrew. The old man had him swing a series of bamboo poles with weights, and he eyed Andrew's swing with each stick, offering occasional suggestions, but mostly muttering to himself and nodding. Andrew must have swung 50 of the canes before the old man was satisfied. The clubmaker had been highly recommended by Andrew's golf instructor, and when he went to pick up the clubs 4 weeks later, he was amazed at the difference between them and the clubs he had started with. The weight was different, the grips, the balance. He swung a few in the old man's garage and knew he had gotten his money's worth. He swung the 7-iron and watched as the ball sailed to a point a little right and short of the pin, sticking in the soft green with a thunk. A divot had flown up behind the ball. Eric ran up to get it. Andrew hated when players left the courses in awful shape. As the caddy gently stamped the strip of turf back into place, Andrew handed him the club. Eric sprayed it with a water bottle, brushed off the dirt, and then dried it with a clean part of a towel he had looped under his belt before placing it back in the bag. There was applause. Andrew was 2 yards from the hole, and felt sure he would drop another stroke on this hole and end up 4 under par, one better than he had planned on. He had underestimated his skill and ability to play this course, a problem he could easily live with. Gary Newman approached his fairway shot with more assurance than the last hole. There was no water to worry about, and the pin placement was generous. He discussed the shot with his caddy for half a minute. They seemed to be arguing about which club to use. Andrew heard a little of the discussion. What kind of golfer was this? What kind of caddy was this? He shook his own head in disgust. Didn't this guy know what his clubs could do? Didn't he spend any time at a driving range checking his distance, or any time reading the course? Of course not. Andrew had seen him make stupid mistakes all morning. He was sure Newman would make another one now. It appeared that Carey won the argument with his caddy. Newman's caddy reluctantly gave Carey the club and stepped back, looking down and shaking his head. Carey swung, and the ball sailed over the flagstick, bounced off the back of the green, and then rolled onto a slope of rough-cut grass. A simple shot, and he had overclubbed it. It was sad, thought Andrew, when your caddy knew how well you could hit a club better than you did. Frederick Martin led the 3 golfers as they and their caddies walked up to the green. His ball had rolled a foot or so into the trap. There were perhaps 4 yards of sand before the green and a 6-inch lip to hop over. It was a simple chip out since the green sloped up from there, and all he had to do was whack the ball out and up, thought Andrew. 2 putts should get him in with a bogey. Martin took his sand wedge to the trap and set himself up, his right foot on the grass, the left foot lower in the sand. Andrew cringed as he looked at Martin's setup and waited. As he was tilted to the left, Martin's right knee needed to be bent more. Frederick took a half swing and chopped into the sand behind the ball. The ball flew nearly 4 yards and caught the edge of the grass just before the green. It plopped back into the sand, right next to the small ledge. A simple adjustment in his stance could have avoided this. Andrew chuckled to himself at Martin's performance. These were the 2 best players he was going to face today. If they were making such simple mistakes, then Hanover would undoubtedly follow suit, especially once he was matched up 1-on-1 with Andrew on the back 9. Martin took his second shot out of the sand, and the ball plopped up and even cleared the fringe to make it to the green, but a good 10 yards from the hole. Newman walked around the back of the green and chipped his ball skillfully on, stopping just a foot short of the hole. A little more swing and it might have hit the pin and dropped in. Just the sort of lucky shot Andrew imagined must have besieged Hanover in the front 9. Carey Newman marked his ball, and Andrew picked his up as well. Frederick Martin putted a little long and sank his second putt for a double bogey, 2 over par. The last 2 holes had been brutal to his score, and he stormed off, not acknowledging the scant applause. Newman sank his putt easily and was rewarded with a more enthusiastic greeting. It was only a par, but he had been able to make it an up and down. The crowd apparently liked to see someone come back from adversity. Andrew preferred never to be in such a position. Patterson placed his ball on the green. He had a 2-foot putt, his favorite distance. He could sink 2-foot putts all day. Even with sloping greens and chewed-up grass, the odds of missing this distance were very low for a player with Andrew's ability. He looked the green over, confident it was a straight shot. This would be a perfect place to pick up an unexpected birdie, a little insurance against Hanover's luck. Eric handed Andrew the jade-headed putter. It was a simple design, just a flat 3/4-inch thick blade with a line scored across the middle of the top, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. Other players favored putters with special materials inset into the face, and a flat tail with a series of lines or circles to help them line up the putt. Andrew's was similar to the generic putters that one obtained from a miniature golf course. Simple, but elegant. The putter had been commissioned from a sculptor. The artist had been intrigued by Andrew's request and had adamantly pointed out that he had no skill in designing or building golf clubs. Andrew just asked that the club balance at a point 6 inches up the shaft from the head and have a perfectly flat hitting surface. The sculptor exceeded Andrew's expectations. The jade was dark and richly grained. The mother-of-pearl inset was iridescent and a perfect addition. The handle was gold-plated. Solid gold would have been too heavy and would ruin the functionality of the club. When he first took it to the practice green, he dropped a ball 20 yards from a hole. He lined up the mother-of-pearl sightline with the hole and hit the ball. It rolled 60 feet and dropped right in. Perhaps Andrew could have done that shot with any putter he happened to pick up, but he was very pleased with the craftsmanship of this work of art and promptly sent the artist a bonus check of $1,000 to show his appreciation. Patterson stepped up to his ball. He could hear some of the whispers from people in the crowd, getting their first glimpses of his unusual club. He drew back about 3 inches, then hit the ball and watched it roll squarely into the hole. The applause started thin, but then people were starting to realize they had just witnessed a birdie. It would be Andrew Patterson and Scott Hanover playing head-to-head in the final 9 holes. Andrew pulled his ball out and handed the club to Eric, who wiped the club with a cloth before slipping it back into its case. Martin and Newman waited at the edge of the green to shake Andrew's hand. They had already found out that they would be finishing the tournament without him in their group. They congratulated him in a sportsmanlike fashion, and Andrew graciously accepted their best wishes. Perhaps each thought he still had a chance, but as long as Andrew stuck to his plan, he was unbeatable. Unbeatable. "Congratulations, Mr. Patterson," greeted Carl Bateman. He had just wedged himself out of his golf cart. Another large man, smoking a cigar, remained in the cart, seemingly not impressed with Andrew's presence. "I just wanted to let you know we'll be pairing you with another golfer for the final 9 holes." "So I've heard," Andrew said. "Ah, yes. Well, Mr. Hanover seems to have created a bit of a sensation, Mr. Patterson, and the Northern Illinois Amateur Golf Association and the tournament will greatly benefit from the coverage the USA Sports Channel will be providing." Bateman nodded at Harold Frisk, sitting in the cart. "We're planning on teeing off in about 20 minutes. Muttered Andrew. "Hardly seems fair. I mean, Hanover has had 2 hours to rest and relax, and I'm supposed to be ready to compete in 20 minutes? Well, that's just the way it worked out. Nothing to be done about it, really. No rules against it." "That's okay," said Andrew, happy to get the official into a worrisome froth. "I'll be fine. I'm loose and warmed up. 20 minutes will be perfect." "Wonderful, wonderful. We'll see you on the tee." Carl returned to his cart and beeped the horn as he sped back the 100 yards or so to the clubhouse. "That's Patterson?" growled Harold Frisk. "What a colorful character. Where did he get those clothes?" "Yes, quite interesting," Carl agreed. "I think that would tend to draw more interest if the viewers take him seriously. I assure you Mr. Patterson is a serious and quite accomplished golfer." "You think he can beat Hanover, then?" "Based on skill alone, no doubt. Patterson's had a good morning. His play is very consistent. I'm sure he'll continue at this level," Bateman mused out loud. "Hopefully it'll come down to the last hole. The best sports events always come down to sudden death. The Bulls' 5th World Championship winning shot went in with the buzzer." Wonderful game. Had a courtside seat for that one. Never forgot it. Well, I'm sure no matter what happens, it will thrill the viewers. Let's not get too carried away, Mr. Bateman. It is golf, after all. Right. He pulled up to the makeshift USA Sports Control Room. I'll meet you here in 15 minutes, said Carl, as Frisk swung his legs to the ground and pulled himself out. Frisk grunted and puffed out a cloud of cigar smoke. We got it, said a voice from Bateman's left. What? The man standing next to the cart caught him by surprise. He was wearing a black rubber suit, dripping water onto the ground. He held up a white golf ball with a yellow duck on it for the large, red-jacketed man to see. That's Hanover's ball? Yep, answered the greenskeeper and scuba diver. I didn't think you'd find it, Bateman said. I almost didn't. What do you want to do with it? Get it to Kenny Chase. He'll need to analyze it. Carl breathed a sigh of relief. Chase would check the ball out, and any possibility of scandal would be quietly put to rest, with no one the wiser. He hated to imagine what Frisk would think if he knew that the tournament hadn't checked out Hanover's balls before he started. Well, no worries about that. He hit the gas pedal and drove off to the 10th tee. Ellie pulled the batteries out of the quick chargers and loaded them into her bag. Her tape camera was replaced with a live transmission camera that would have its images passed through the control room and then to the studios downtown, then fed to the network affiliates and any station interested in picking it up. Several markets had already shown interest, according to Uncle Harold, and Ellie hoped more would. A boring Saturday was turning into an exciting day, and she was helping to make it possible. "What's up, Ellie?" asked a squeaky voice. Ellie clenched her teeth in apprehension. "Hi, Louis," she answered, without turning around. "I got some tape to send up. Getting your camera ready?" he asked. Of course she was. Couldn't he see that? "I was out taping Andrew Patterson. The guy is going to be hard to beat. He's got the game down." "That's why he's ranked number 1, agreed Ellie. "Something weird, though, on 8. "Something weird?" "There was a diver out there looking for balls, I guess. Kind of strange, don't you think? That water must be freezing. Guy must be nuts." "Probably," said Ellie. She was carefully adjusting and readjusting her equipment, waiting for Louis Filtree to finish setting the tape up for transmission. So far, so good. If she could just... "So, what are you doing after the tournament?" asked Louis. Too late. Louis Filtree was the kind of guy who just didn't get the message. He'd asked Ellie out maybe 24 times, and even though she'd made excuses every time, he just didn't get it. It's not that Louis wasn't a nice guy. He was very sweet and considerate. He just wasn't Ellie's type. She liked to think she wasn't that shallow when it came to looks, but she had to have some standards. Those mutton chop sideburns and thick black plastic eyeglass frames were just too much for her. She started to make another excuse and stopped herself. Maybe there was another way to handle Louis. "I'll probably go home and wash my hair," she said. Louis shrugged and went about his work. "Maybe," she continued, her voice shifting into a sultry tone, "you'd like to help." "Excuse me?" gulped Louis. "You can wash it over and over and over. Wouldn't that be nice?" I suppose, Ellie," he stammered. "Then you can wash my feet, between my toes. Maybe even help me pick the junk from under the nails." "What?" asked Louis. His surprised excitement was turning to confusion. "Then you could swab my ears. I get so much of that sticky wax in there. You would be careful, wouldn't you?" she asked playfully. "You're not supposed to put Q-tips in your ears, Ellie." "I trust you, Louis. I just get so dirty." The cameraman's expression was taking on an air of disgust. I was thinking a bite to eat," he said. "Oh, I could never enjoy a nice meal with such dirty toes and ears." Too bad, I guess," said a relieved Louis. I'll catch you on the course, he added, as he trotted off to the control room at the clubhouse. Ellie smiled. Maybe that would cure him. It might also get her a strange reputation at the station. Oh well, it was fun. She carefully sealed the box containing her tapes from this morning. She would transfer them to DVD for Scott Hanover along with the coverage this afternoon. It would make a wonderful keepsake no matter how it would turn out. Jason Bernard had assigned Ellie to be on Hanover and Patterson. She would be filming their swings and shots, mostly from behind. The third cameraman, Alf Redding, Jason's regular partner, would be situated to capture the ball coming toward the green, and the third man, Louis Filtree, was available to float around to get various shots of the course and zoom in on the balls as they landed in the fairways or hazards as the case might be. He also would help Lucy Pendle to capture the immediate reactions from golfers regarding not only their own but their opponents' shots. Jason Bernard would be doing on-air commentary from the control booth, warm and dry and full of hot coffee. Ellie smiled as she thought about their meeting earlier that morning. His attitude had nearly turned 180 degrees. Perhaps some of the change had been due to the fact that she had urged her Uncle Harold to jump on the story. But she felt that Mr. Bernard had also recognized that Scott Hanover's amazing round so far was a major sports story. She knew Jason wasn't going to become a golf fan, but his professionalism as a reporter, and now commentator, pushed his apathy for golf aside. He would do a good job, not only because this was an exciting sports event in its own right, but also because he realized it was good for his career. Ellie adjusted the small mirror inside the van that the reporters used to check their appearance before going on camera. Her freckled face and fiery red hair were not the type of appearance that got one on camera, but her interest didn't lie in that end of television. She hoped to be a producer like Keith Kelly someday and treated her experience as a camerawoman as invaluable. She had started out interning in the editing room and doing research for the producers. She knew if she asked Uncle Harold to get her a producing job, he would pull the right strings, but she wanted to earn it in her own mind. There would always be those who thought she had advanced because of her relationship to Harold Frisk, but as long as she knew she earned it, she could put up with that. She let loose her ponytail, brushed out her hair a little, and gathered back up all the hairs that had fallen loose during the morning. She rarely wore makeup, and there was certainly no reason to do it today. She popped out a fresh stick of double mint gum and slipped it into her mouth. She closed her eyes and enjoyed the burst of flavor that lasted only for a minute before it was chewed out of existence. She checked her watch and quickly snapped out of her relaxed state. There was only 10 minutes until the scheduled tee-off of the final pair. She slipped the battery bag over her left shoulder and lifted the camera on to her right. If nothing else, this job made her feel less guilty about not exercising regularly. She slid the van door shut and punched in the code to set the alarm into the keypad by the handle, then raced for the clubhouse. Her heart was pounding with anticipation. She hoped Scott Hanover could pull it off. A 3-stroke lead was not all that great in an amateur tournament, especially against a player like Patterson. Ellie had heard about Patterson's skill and consistency, and knew that Hanover had been playing on luck and a prayer. She hoped it would hold, and added her own prayer for him to hang in. She remembered Hanover's shot into the water on 8. Did the scuba diver Lewis mentioned have anything to do with that? Maybe just a souvenir hunter hoping to get one of Scott's soon-to-be-famous duck logo balls. Jason Bernard slipped the headphones on. "Can you hear me?" asked a voice. He adjusted the microphone to sit at the corner of his mouth. "Loud and clear," he answered. "Okay, Mr. Bernard. I'm Freddie King. I'll be feeding you statistics and information you may want to use on air. I'll probably be telling you stuff that you can't use or don't think is appropriate, so just ignore me if you want to. Won't bother me." "Do you have all this stuff memorized?" The voice laughed. "A little. Mostly I'm doing research in the archive and the internet. There are a few other people here who may want to contribute, but I'll filter out the bad stuff. I wish I could say I knew a lot about golf.
You play?
Asked Freddie. A couple times in college, but never got the bug, I guess.
Well, you know the basics. I'll fill you in on any special or obscure rules that come into play. This is your first time in the commenter chair?
Yes, you always think that you'll jump right into the NFL or NBA.
Well, golf isn't that bad. It might be a little slow since we're only covering 2 players, but it's been done before with great success. Challenge matches, like when Sergio played Tiger in the desert.
Freddie pointed out. Right, said Jason. He had no idea what Freddie was talking about, but he didn't want Freddie to know that.
Listen, if you have any questions, just flip off the live switch on your mic and I'll still be able to hear you here.
Terrific, Jason said.
You'll be fine. They got a camera on you?
Yes.
Cool. I'll be able to see you, but you won't be able to see me.
I better watch what I do with my fingers.
Gross,
said Freddie. Don't worry. It'll mostly be voiceover shots. Occasionally we'll have a report on the course and a little live reaction from the players and observers.
Excellent. This is going to be smooth as butter, Mr. Bernard.
Please, call me Jason.
Yes, sir, Jason. I'll be back in 5.
Jason leaned back in his chair. He had 5 monitors in front of him. One was tuned to the Chicago USA Sports live feed. One showed him sitting at the small table, an aerial map of the golf course taped up behind him. The other 3 were blue screens and would display the feeds from the 3 roving cameras on the course. One of them came alive. A distorted view of a girl's face appeared. The camera was pointing up at her chin, and she smiled into the lens.
You guys getting a picture?
Asked Ellie's familiar voice. The director answered her. More like a horror picture, he joked.
Yeah, right,
she answered. The view changed as she picked up the camera. The screen showed a crowd of people around the 10th tee. She started to turn, and Jason was amazed to see the right side of the fairway lined with onlookers. The left side was all trees and off-limits. Halfway down the fairway was a sand trap on the right, and more sand traps guarded the green. Just behind the green, a narrow break in the trees showed the path to the 11th tee, as Ellie zoomed in on the green. A pole topped with a red flag sat in the hole to the left side of the green.
Pretty easy par 4,
commented Ellie. Why is it so easy? Asked Jason.
Oh, Mr. Bernard, didn't realize you were set up yet.
Ready and waiting.
Excited?
She asked. Busting at the seams. His voice was sarcastic in tone, but Ellie knew he was excited to be given this chance, even if it was just a golf tournament. But I really would like to know why this is considered an easy par 4.
Well, it's a long hole, but straight. No doglegs. The fairway is wide open, and the flag is on a relatively flat area of the green. A good second shot would allow a seasoned golfer to maybe birdie.
And what would you shoot? Asked Jason.
Me? A 6. See that sand?
She zoomed into the sand trap on the right.
That's where my first shot from the ladies' tee would end up. I have an uncanny ability to find and land in every sand trap on the course.
Sounds like you at least have fun, commented the director.
Every swing,
laughed Ellie.
Let me know when you're ready to go. I think the golfers are starting to head this way.
She clicked off her mic. From here on out, the banter would be limited to professional comments and directions. Even though she didn't plan on staying a camerawoman all her life, she took her job seriously and wanted to do the best job she could. Getting settled in? Growled a voice from behind Jason. A heavy, large hand settled on his right shoulder, followed closely by a blue cloud of cigar smoke. Mr. Frisk, yes, absolutely. You'll do fine. I've got an eye for talent, and you've got it. Caught your interview with Hanover. Good work. Keep it up. Yes, sir, answered Jason. I'll be out of your hair following the golfers. Let Bob, the director, do his job and listen to Freddie. He's a smart kid. Knows what people like to hear. He'll make you look good if you let him. And don't let Pendle try to steal the show. Ran into Keith Kelly. He was begging me to switch you two. Technically, it's his decision since he's producing, but I overrode him.
What's the point in being head honcho if you don't flex your muscle every once in a while?
His bare claw grip on Jason's shoulder tightened, and he shook him in his chair. Another puff of smoke filled the small room. Jason knew smoking wasn't allowed around the electronic equipment, but if no one else was going to point it out to Harold Frisk, he wasn't either.
Now, where is that Bateman fellow? Wondered Frisk out loud as he stepped out.
How's the shoulder? Asked Bob after the big man left.
Don't ask me to go bowling tonight,
answered Jason. Bob laughed. The other two cameras came online, and the director made sure they were in place. The second monitor showed Lucy, standing slumped by the tee. She was nodding her head and sighing.
This was definitely worth it, thought Jason.
To see Lucy Pendle working the sidelines while he had the booth was too good to be true. You think you pulled something off, Bernard? Questioned a voice from behind him. He swiveled around in his chair. It was Keith Kelly. You think that sending Lucy to the sidelines like a rookie is going to get you ahead? Not if I have anything to do with it.
Hey, it wasn't my decision, answered Jason.
I bet. You just had Frisk's niece do your dirty work. Almost as good as doing the boss's daughter, he added. Jason curbed his anger. I hope you're not implying there's anything going on between me and Ellie. People can draw their own conclusions, answered Keith. Hey, I didn't want to be here today, but the story broke and I was on the scene. It's only fair I get to reap the rewards. Don't screw up, he warned, and left the control room. You don't want to mess with him, commented Bob. Yeah, I know, agreed Jason. But I can't let him spread rumors like that. Hey, no one would believe them, Jason, Bob pointed out. Thanks, Bob, said Jason. No problem. 5 minutes, announced a red-jacketed woman who was poking her head into the dining area of the clubhouse. Scott, Paul, Sarah, Sally, Jake, and Gina were still gathered around the table. They had been laughing at some of Jake's stories and acted like old friends now. Well, started Jake, I don't suppose you need it, but good luck anyway, Scott. Hey, I'll take all I can get. Paul was staring out the window. What is that? He asked. Jake turned around to follow his gaze. Oh, you guys haven't met your opponent yet, have you? That colorful, eccentric, and, dare I say, strange man is Andrew Patterson. He must be good if he can get away with dressing like that, said Paul. The rest laughed. Don't stare too long at him, Scott. That outfit could induce a seizure. Well, to each his own, I guess, said Scott. Sarah, Gina, you two are with me, insisted Sally. I've arranged for a tournament official escort for Sarah and me, and I'm sure it would be no problem to add Gina. We'll be able to make our way easily through the crowds and follow the boys on their quest. You make it sound like they're hunting a dragon, Jake said. More like birdie hunting, she joked. We'd better be off. Scott helped Sarah out of her chair. I'd better hit the bathroom again, she said. She kissed Scott and stroked his cheek. Good luck, my love. Have fun. I'll try, answered Scott. He hugged her, and she, Gina, and Sally headed to the bathroom. He turned to Jake. Where will you be? I'll be around. Karen Blakely, my colleague, will likely be trying to get the best exposure for Patterson she can. I need to make sure your accomplishments get played up, too. Listen, Jake, said Scott, I really appreciate your faith in me and all, but I'm not all that sure about being a spokesman for anybody. Sarah's right. I'm going to be really busy in a few weeks, and I can't make any promises. Fair enough, Scott. I came here today to try and restart a career that has been sinking during the last year. I was sure that if I could sign Patterson and get him a decent contract, then I'd get my confidence back and be able to pick up where I left off. What I discovered is that I'm not the kind of agent that gets people like Patterson. I'm a little guy, and I have a little life that up until a little while ago I thought was worthless. Scott, you've got a terrific wife coming all this way to see you play. You've got a great friend in Paul to caddy for you. You've built up mild fervor in the amateur golfing world of guys who are thinking, hey, I can do that too. Companies want people like that. Win or lose, there will be something for you. It may not be a national campaign with Callaway, but something. Gina seems pretty nice, Scott said, changing the subject. She's just a friend? Well, more than a friend. If I can get my act together, maybe a lot more. Well, I'll see you, Jake. Break a leg, offered Jake. He shook Scott's hand. Paul offered his as well. If you ask me, it's a blessing you're not Patterson's agent. What if he wanted you to dress like him? Jake laughed and patted Paul on the shoulder. Take care of our boy there. Hey, how do you think he got this far? Paul asked, smiling. The only bad part to this arrangement was that Hanover would get to tee off first, Andrew realized. If Andrew went first, Hanover would have the pressure to equal or better Andrew's first shot. He hoped the crowds and the television coverage which didn't accompany Hanover to such an extent on the first 9 would provide a distraction to the golfer. Andrew finished brushing out his spikes, and Eric Peters followed him to the tee. Eric was careful to remain behind him and to Patterson's right. He was watching for Patterson to put his right hand out. Upon that signal, Eric was to hand him the next club that Patterson had listed on his course plan. Eric was always amazed at how Patterson could predict how he would play a course. It was eerie at times. He always made his shots and sometimes got lucky, although it really wasn't luck. Eric knew Patterson didn't believe in luck. It was fortuitousness. A long putt might roll into the hole instead of a foot from it. A chip from the fairway might land close enough to the hole for a birdie attempt. He'd never seen Patterson get a hole-in-one or an eagle, but those were rare even for the professionals. Hanover and his caddy walked up to the tee, side by side. Compared to Andrew's outfit, Scott Hanover was severely underdressed for the occasion. Ready for the shootout? Asked a woman wearing a green blazer emboldened with a USA Sports logo, the same logo on the microphone Andrew found sticking in his face. He looked up and a man was pointing a camera at him. Shootout? He asked. Yes, perhaps showdown is a better term. I will play my game, and Mr. Hanover will play his, as we've been doing all along. I'm confident that I will, in the end, win. Why are you so confident? Scott Hanover is on pace to set a PGA record. Andrew laughed. Mr. Hanover has been lucky, but to sustain such a pace is like sprinting the first mile of a marathon and expecting to keep it up the whole race. It simply can't be done. Well, we'll see, answered Lucy. Mr. Patterson, just wanted to introduce myself and wish you good luck, Scott said. Andrew took his hand. Good luck to you, Mr. Hanover. Oh, make it Scott. Andrew, reciprocated Patterson. And so begins the battle for the road to the PGA, said Lucy Pendle. From the control room, Jason winced as he watched Lucy's image replaced with an animated spinning USA Sports logo as they went to a commercial break. Battle for the road, he muttered in disbelief. Even for Lucy, that was pretty bad. Didn't even know we were at war, commented Bob. Ted Lang had found a spot 50 yards down on the right side of the 10th fairway. Joe Culkin stood next to him. Curious onlookers crowded the fairway, and red-jacketed men tried to keep them well back of the line between close-cut fairway and the taller rough-cut grass, allowing the golfers a little leeway for bad shots. It was obvious they weren't prepared for so many spectators, many having arrived in the last hour. There were even reports of people scaling the fences surrounding the course and staking out spots along some of the later holes. Ted had been to enough tournaments to know that by the time these two reached the 17th and 18th holes, it could be a logistical nightmare. He had urged the tournament officials to get some more security in and had been advised that some Forest Preserve officers and Cook County Sheriff's deputies were on the way. Ted saw a few uniforms throughout the crowd, but suspected they were there just as fans at the moment. "Well, Ted, I never imagined Patterson would find himself in a position to have to catch up when this tournament started. He did make more than one mistake on 7, though, but he also made a couple of shots I don't think he was counting on," commented Joe. Mused Ted. "You do have to give him credit. He is technically a good golfer." "Oh, yes, but no risk-taking at all, no guts when it comes to maybe trying to cut off a few strokes," answered Joe. "Scott could easily lose that 3-stroke lead in 2 or 3 holes, maybe even 1 if he has a disaster." "Anything is possible, Joe, and that goes both ways. It's just statistics. Every gambler will tell you that when a hot streak comes along, you gotta play it for all it's worth. And when the cold streaks are there, you just kinda hunker down and wait it out." "I suppose. I've seen golfers have great rounds before. Nothing like 7 under for 9 holes, but I guess there have been some who have topped that." "A few, but they always balanced out the record-setting 9 holes with an average back or front 9 to keep the whole round out of the books." "You think that'll happen with Scott?" "Joe, I have no idea what will happen in terms of the final score and who will win this tournament or not. But I do know it will be one of the more interesting rounds of golf I've ever seen." "I'll go along with that." "Looks like they're getting ready to tee off," noted Ted.
The final 2 players this afternoon will be teeing off at the 10th hole now. First up is Scott Hanover of Chicago, Illinois, currently at a course and tournament record of 7 under par for 9 holes and leading by 3 strokes.
The announcement caught Karen Blakely by surprise. They were teeing off already? She looked at her watch and held it to her ear. The stupid thing had stopped. What were they making batteries out of nowadays? First her phone, now her watch. What else could go wrong today? It could take April an hour or more to get here. Hopefully she'd be able to find the Callaway rep she mentioned. Karen had emptied her purse twice more in search of change for a phone call. She could always make a collect call, she supposed, but if April was on her way, then Jonathan might pick up again. It was all turning into a big mess. The crowd had grown in the last 15 minutes, and most had migrated to the 10th hole. There was a slight hill between the first fairway and the 10th, and that seemed to be a good spot for most people to see what was happening. She started to work her way through the people, ignoring the catcalls and hoots from several middle-aged men who seemed to have had a few too many, despite the Forest Preserve ban on alcohol. As she squeezed by the scoreboard, she heard a rip in fabric and a tug on her right side. A large nail had snagged her blouse. She cursed the nail and unhooked herself from its rusty clutches. It just kept piling on. She pushed through the people without even asking to be excused anymore, and the comments she received were more rude suggestions than suggestive comments. A red-jacketed man stopped her as she tried to get to the inner circle of people on the tee. She reached to show him her badge, and it was gone. Karen stood still and let out a deep breath and started to laugh. The laughter built until a few people around her began to stare. It was growing out of control, and she wondered if this was what it was like to have a nervous breakdown. She thought of the unkempt, poorly shaven image of Jake Fisher and figured she wasn't too far from his place on the totem pole. "She's with me," Jake said. She turned her laughter into a chuckle as she followed the sound of his voice to see Jake Fisher standing behind her. He was flashing his credentials to the official, who gave a wary look at her and then shrugged as if to say, "Better your problem than mine." He stepped aside to let them pass. "Lost your badge again?" asked Jake. "You probably took it so you could come to my rescue again," she said. "I swear I didn't." "Don't think I'm letting you in on Patterson," she warned. "I wouldn't dare think that," said Jake. "Why are you helping me?" Let's say I'm keeping an eye on you, he answered. You don't think I'm interested in trying to snag Hanover from you, do you? She asked. No, Scott Hanover would see right through you. I'm just interested in how you're going to handle things when Patterson loses this tournament. Loses? Not likely. The guy is a robot. All it will take is for Hanover to start playing his usual game, and the tables will turn very quickly. Well, just remember, Hanover is getting just as much coverage as Patterson is. You never know what those fickle executives at Callaway are going to do. Maybe they'll like the idea of an underdog that came close, rather than a favorite who just played his usual game. Jake nodded towards the tee. Hanover's getting ready to hit. Quiet, please, announced a large, red-jacketed official standing off to the right side of the tee. Thank you for listening to A Really Good Day, a novel by James Hosek, narrated by Rich Hosek. If you are interested in purchasing a hardcover edition of this story for yourself or a golfer in your life, visit gymbooks.myshopify.com. You'll get free shipping in the United States. You'll also get the complete audiobook and ebook editions with your purchase. And make sure to subscribe to the mailing list for updates about the upcoming release of his Doctor at Mystery series, cozy mysteries about a crime-solving veterinarian. Thanks again, and all the very best.